The mess hall at the Marine Corps base was alive with the usual morning chaos. The smell of strong coffee mixed with sizzling bacon and eggs, while Marines in crisp uniforms moved with disciplined urgency between tables. Everyone was focused on their routines. Some were quickly grabbing breakfast before morning drills. Others were quietly chatting with their colleagues. Among them, Lieutenant Emily Hayes sat at a corner table, quietly drinking her coffee and reviewing notes for the day ahead. She was known among her peers for being calm, composed, and extremely focused, the kind of officer who carried herself with quiet confidence rather than loud authority. Emily's morning had been like any other, but the atmosphere in the mess hall was slightly tense that day. There were whispers about upcoming inspections, new training schedules, and rumors of visiting high-ranking officers. Emily, however, was completely absorbed in her own preparation. She sipped her coffee, carefully observing the room without drawing attention to herself. She was small in stature, but her presence had a subtle command that even those who didn't know her personally could feel. As she reached for a piece of toast, a sudden jolt interrupted the calm rhythm of her morning. A senior Marine, in a rush and perhaps irritated by the crowd, shoved her aside while reaching for the last tray of scrambled eggs. It was a quick, careless motion, a push that might have seemed insignificant to an outsider, but in the tight, disciplined world of the Marines, it was a breach of basic respect. Heads turned immediately. Some Marines frowned at the behavior, others looked away awkwardly, unsure whether to intervene. The sound of the shove, brief but noticeable, echoed slightly in the mess hall, breaking the routine morning chatter. Emily's first reaction was instinctive control. She didn't push back, didn't snap at the Marine, and didn't allow her expression to betray any anger. Instead, she straightened her uniform, adjusted her posture, and continued eating as if nothing had happened. She understood something fundamental about respect and leadership. Reacting impulsively could escalate a minor incident into a confrontation. She had faced much tougher situations on the field, where staying calm was often the difference between success and failure. This shove, though disrespectful, was nothing compared to the challenges she had already overcome. Around her, other Marines were now more aware of what had just happened. Some whispered to each other, exchanging looks of surprise and confusion. "Did he really just push her?" one asked under his breath. "Yeah," another replied, shaking his head. "I think he doesn't even know who she is." Emily's reputation was still somewhat a mystery to many in the mess hall, especially newer Marines or those from different units. While she had accomplished a lot in her career, she didn't walk around boasting about her achievements. Her record spoke for itself, but only for those who had taken the time to learn it. The Marine who had shoved her, now with his tray in hand, seemed to realize the sudden attention he had drawn. There was a brief flicker of embarrassment in his eyes as he looked back at Emily. For a moment he hesitated, unsure of how to act next. Many Marines in the mess hall were watching silently, some curious, some judgmental, and some simply waiting to see how she would respond. Emily, however, gave no sign of retaliation. Her calm, measured demeanor made it clear that she did not need to prove herself through confrontation. This small incident, though seemingly ordinary, hinted at Emily's larger story. It showed the stark contrast between appearances and reality in the military. To the Marine who shoved her, she might have seemed like just another officer, someone he could push past without consequence. But Emily was no ordinary Marine. Her past missions, her leadership experience, and her ability to remain composed under pressure had prepared her for moments exactly like this one. As the mess hall gradually returned to its normal rhythm, Emily quietly finished her coffee. She had already turned her attention to the day ahead. The incident was over, yet the ripples of it lingered. Some Marines now looked at her differently, sensing that there was something remarkable about this quiet, unassuming officer. Others, including the Marine who had pushed her, were left with a subtle but unmistakable sense of respect mixed with apprehension. Emily's reaction, or rather her lack of reaction, spoke louder than words ever could. In that moment, Emily Hayes showed a core principle that would define the rest of the story. True strength isn't always about fighting back. Sometimes, it's about patience, composure, and letting actions speak for themselves. The shove in the mess hall was a small spark, but it was a spark that would soon ignite a sequence of events leading to something much bigger, an acknowledgment from the very highest ranks of the Marine Corps. And though she didn't know it yet, the respect she had quietly earned in that small corner of the mess hall was about to be recognized in a way that no one present would ever forget. After the brief but shocking shove in the mess hall, the atmosphere was charged with curiosity. Marines who had witnessed the incident whispered quietly to one another, exchanging glances that spoke volumes. Some were confused, wondering how a small, composed officer could simply absorb such a disrespectful act without reacting. Others were intrigued, sensing that there was more to Lieutenant Emily Hayes than met the eye. The incident had sparked questions, curiosity, and a quiet tension that hung in the air, almost as palpable as the smell of coffee and toast. Some Marines leaned closer to their friends, speaking in hushed tones. "Who is she really?" one asked, nodding toward Emily as she calmly finished her breakfast. Another whispered, "I've heard she's done some incredible things overseas, but no one really talks about it openly." Rumors began to spread, growing slightly with each retelling. Some described her as a brilliant tactician, others mentioned her experience in critical missions where she had saved lives. But for most in the mess hall, she remained a mystery, a quiet officer who commanded respect in ways that were not immediately obvious. Emily, however, paid little attention to the whispers. She had learned early in her career that in the military, curiosity and speculation often accompanied respect. She knew that people's assumptions rarely matched reality. While some Marines might only see her small stature and calm demeanor, those who truly knew her understood that she had endured and achieved more than many of them could imagine. For Emily, it was not about proving herself in that moment. It was about maintaining composure, keeping focus, and letting her actions speak louder than words. As the murmurs continued, Emily's mind was already on the day ahead. She had meetings to attend, reports to review, and a schedule filled with training exercises. Yet, she could feel the subtle awareness in the room. Every now and then, she would catch a Marine sneaking a glance in her direction, and she could sense their growing curiosity and respect. It was not the kind of attention she sought, but it was inevitable in her line of work. Emily had always understood that leadership was less about being noticed and more about being prepared, capable, and dependable, regardless of the circumstances. Some Marines speculated about the shove itself. "He must not have known who she was," one muttered. "No one would just shove her if they knew." Others nodded, realizing that Emily's reputation, while respected by some, was not universally known across the base. She had worked on high-stakes operations that were confidential, missions so sensitive that even her closest peers only knew fragments of her experiences. Most Marines only saw her during everyday routines like breakfast or drills, where she appeared just like any other officer. Yet, her calm response to disrespect spoke louder than the stories they had heard. Among those watching, the Marine who had pushed her was beginning to feel the weight of his actions. His initial irritation had evaporated, replaced by a growing unease. He realized he had misjudged Emily entirely. She did not react with anger or confrontation, yet there was a quiet strength in her posture and demeanor that demanded recognition. The shove, which he had thought would barely register, had become a moment of reflection for him, a lesson in humility and respect. As the morning continued, the mess hall slowly returned to its normal rhythm. Plates clattered, coffee machines hissed, and conversations resumed. But the whispers about Emily never fully disappeared. Every glance her way carried a mix of curiosity, admiration, and a sense of wonder. It became clear to those present that Emily was no ordinary officer. Her presence, her composure, and the quiet authority she carried all hinted at a history of courage and achievement far beyond what most Marines had experienced. In her own mind, Emily understood exactly what was happening. She knew that the way people perceived her in that moment would shape their understanding of her leadership. Moments like these, small and seemingly insignificant, could influence how others approached her, how they listened to her, and how they followed her guidance. She also knew that respect, once earned, was far more powerful than any instant reaction or verbal defense. Her silence, her calm, and her professionalism were a testament to the years of training, discipline, and real-life experience that had molded her into the officer she had become. By the time she finished her breakfast and prepared to leave the mess hall, Emily had already turned her attention fully to the tasks ahead. Yet the energy she left behind was undeniable. Marines whispered quietly about what they had seen, and the incident became an unspoken story of the day. Some began to look at her differently, realizing that there was a depth to her experience and leadership that they had never considered. Others were simply impressed by her composure, understanding that she had handled an awkward and disrespectful situation with grace, strength, and quiet authority. In that moment, the lesson for everyone in the mess hall was clear. Appearances could be deceiving, and true leadership often revealed itself not in confrontation but in calm, measured responses to challenges. Emily Hayes had already earned silent admiration, and while she didn't seek recognition, it was becoming evident that her actions were beginning to leave a lasting impression. This day, which had started like any other, was quietly turning into a defining moment for those who witnessed it, setting the stage for something even more extraordinary that was about to unfold. The morning in the mess hall had barely settled after the push incident when a sudden shift in energy swept through the room. Conversations halted mid-sentence, trays were paused in hands, and even the clatter of dishes seemed to soften. At the far end of the hall, four figures in pristine uniforms entered, immediately drawing attention. They were generals, high-ranking officers whose presence alone commanded respect. Their steps were measured, deliberate, and quiet, yet every Marine in the room instinctively straightened up, aware that protocol and respect were expected. The entire atmosphere changed in an instant. The room that had just been buzzing with whispers now felt tense, charged, almost reverent. Emily noticed them immediately. She didn't need to look twice. She had spent years training to recognize leadership presence. The four generals were known throughout the Corps, not just for their ranks, but for the critical missions they had led, the decisions that had shaped operations, and the respect they commanded in every unit. To see all four of them together was rare. Their appearance in the mess hall was unusual, almost ceremonial, but it carried an unspoken weight. Even without speaking, they had transformed the room. Every Marine present sensed that something significant was about to happen, though no one knew exactly what. The general's eyes scanned the mess hall carefully, observing each table with calm scrutiny. Their gaze was not idle. It was searching, deliberate, measured. It was as if they were looking for someone, though the purpose was unclear. Whispers began anew, but now with a mix of fear and curiosity. "Who are they looking for?" one Marine asked quietly. Another responded, "I have no idea, but whatever it is, it's serious." The room held its collective breath as the generals moved slowly, almost imperceptibly, toward Emily's corner. Emily felt the tension but remained composed. Years of field experience had taught her that moments like these required focus and awareness. She didn't fidget, she didn't adjust her uniform nervously, and she didn't show any sign of anxiety. Instead, she continued to sit with a straight back, her eyes calm, her hands resting naturally. To the untrained eye, she might have seemed like just another officer finishing breakfast. But those who had served alongside her knew that there was a quiet intensity to her presence. A sense that she was always prepared, always alert, and always in control. The whispers among the Marines grew more animated as the generals drew closer. Some recognized Emily immediately, recalling stories of her extraordinary service. Others were only beginning to realize who she was, piecing together fragments of her reputation with the scene unfolding before them. The generals, aware of the attention in the room, made no sudden gestures, no loud announcements. They approached with a quiet authority that required no words. Their movements themselves communicated recognition, respect, and purpose. It was clear to everyone present that Emily was the focus of their attention. Emily's mind was calm, yet she was acutely aware of the significance of this moment. She understood that high-ranking officers rarely entered the mess hall without reason, and even more rarely singled out a single officer in such a public setting. Her previous experiences, including missions that required split-second decisions under extreme pressure, had prepared her for this kind of recognition. She had learned that in the military, acknowledgment from the top ranks was rare, earned only through excellence, courage, and a record that could withstand scrutiny. And now, those very leaders were seeking her out, silently signaling that they knew her value. The generals stopped a few feet away from Emily's table. For a moment, there was silence so complete it felt almost tangible. The room seemed to shrink around them. Every Marine present was acutely aware of what was happening. The senior Marine who had shoved Emily earlier now shifted uncomfortably in his seat, suddenly understanding that he had been in the presence of someone extraordinary. His earlier arrogance was replaced by a dawning awareness and respect. The simple push, which had seemed insignificant at the time, now felt like a misstep in a story far bigger than he had realized. One of the generals stepped forward slightly, nodding in Emily's direction. The gesture was brief but profound. It was a recognition that required no words, a silent acknowledgment of her accomplishments, her courage, and her unwavering professionalism. Emily, as always, maintained her composure. She returned the nod with quiet respect, her posture straight, her expression calm. There was no need for verbal exchange. In that moment, actions spoke louder than any words could. The room watched in awe as a silent hierarchy of respect unfolded right before their eyes. As the generals lingered briefly, they exchanged quiet words among themselves, referencing missions, operations, and achievements that only a few would ever know about. Their discussion, though muted, confirmed what many in the room were starting to realize. Emily Hayes was no ordinary officer. She had earned the attention of the highest-ranking leaders through dedication, intelligence, and an extraordinary record of service. The contrast between the quiet, composed officer at the table and the awe-inspiring reputation recognized by the generals was striking, and it left a lasting impression on every Marine present. By the time the generals moved on to their next engagement, the room slowly exhaled, the tension easing but leaving a new energy in its wake. Emily remained seated, calm and composed, but the subtle glances and whispers among her peers spoke volumes. Everyone in the mess hall now understood that this quiet officer was someone remarkable. They had witnessed the moment when the highest-ranking leaders of the Corps personally acknowledged her presence, a silent but powerful validation of her extraordinary career. And while Emily had not sought recognition, she had received it in a way that would be remembered by everyone present for years to come. The mess hall, once noisy and bustling, had fallen into a quiet hush that seemed to stretch on indefinitely. Every Marine present felt it, the sudden shift from routine to a moment charged with significance. The four generals had approached Emily Hayes, and now, without a word, a new kind of recognition filled the room. It was a recognition that needed no announcement, no ceremony, no fanfare. The general's presence alone conveyed authority, experience, and respect. Their eyes, scanning the room before settling on Emily, spoke volumes. For a brief moment, the world seemed to narrow, focusing entirely on her. Emily remained calm, seated at her corner table, her hands resting on her coffee cup. Her posture was impeccable, her expression composed, her eyes steady. She didn't look nervous, intimidated, or even surprised. This was not the first time she had been in high-pressure situations. Her entire career had been defined by moments where composure and clarity mattered more than any outward display of emotion. And yet, she could feel the weight of the general's attention, a quiet but unmistakable acknowledgement of her achievements, her leadership, and her reputation. The generals stopped in front of her, maintaining a respectful distance. There was no need for words. The room seemed to sense the gravity of the moment. Whispers ceased. Heads turned subtly toward Emily, and even the Marine who had shoved her earlier shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The small push that had seemed so insignificant a few minutes ago now felt like a distant memory, overshadowed by the quiet awe of this recognition. Emily's reaction, or rather, her calm composure, was now the focal point, and everyone watching began to understand that there was far more to her than they had realized. The generals exchanged subtle nods among themselves, and it was clear to anyone paying attention that they were discussing her in private. The words were quiet, almost inaudible, but the meaning was unmistakable. They were acknowledging her past missions, her dedication, and the countless hours of effort that had shaped her career. These were the leaders who had overseen some of the most critical operations in the Corps, men whose judgments carried immense weight. And they were honoring Emily Hayes, not publicly, not with grand speeches, but in a way that was more profound than any formal recognition could convey. Emily understood the significance of this silent acknowledgement. In the military, respect from those at the top was rare and often more meaningful than any medal or formal commendation. It was a recognition earned through action, courage, and consistency. The general's presence in the mess hall, their deliberate focus on her, and the subtle gestures of acknowledgement were all signals of respect that went far beyond ordinary compliments or casual recognition. It was a moment that spoke to her entire career, a quiet validation of the countless sacrifices, challenges, and victories she had achieved along the way. The Marine who had shoved her now sat frozen, a mix of embarrassment and newfound respect washing over him. He had acted carelessly, assuming that Emily was just another officer who could be pushed aside without consequence. But the general's acknowledgement made it clear that she was extraordinary. In that instant, he realized his mistake. Emily had handled the situation with quiet dignity, allowing her actions and composure to speak for her. And now, the recognition from the highest ranks of the Corps made it impossible to ignore her true stature. For the rest of the Marines present, the scene was mesmerizing. They had witnessed a rare, almost sacred moment of recognition, one that didn't require speeches, applause, or medals. The general's silent acknowledgement was enough to convey Emily's value, her leadership, and her accomplishments. It was a lesson in humility and respect, showing that true authority didn't always need to be loud or dramatic. Sometimes, the most powerful recognition came in quiet, deliberate gestures that spoke volumes without a single word being spoken. Emily remained composed throughout. She didn't lean forward, she didn't try to draw attention, and she didn't make a show of her achievements. Her calm demeanor, her steady gaze, and her unassuming posture conveyed the message more powerfully than any words could have. It was a reminder to everyone present that true strength and respect were often demonstrated through composure, professionalism, and the quiet confidence of someone who had earned their place through action and integrity. As the generals lingered for a moment longer, the room seemed to hold its collective breath. Every Marine present felt the subtle energy shift as recognition and respect radiated from the officers toward Emily. The push in the mess hall, the whispers, the casual glances, all of it was now eclipsed by the gravity of this acknowledgement. Emily's quiet presence had drawn the attention of the very highest leaders in the Corps, and in doing so, she had earned the silent admiration of everyone in the room. When the generals eventually moved on, the tension in the mess hall slowly began to ease, but the impact of the moment lingered. The whispers returned, but now they carried awe and respect rather than curiosity or doubt. Marines who had previously underestimated Emily now saw her in a new light. The lesson was clear. Respect was earned through integrity, composure, and unwavering dedication. Emily Hayes had demonstrated all of these qualities, and the silent acknowledgement of the generals had made it unmistakable. In that quiet moment, the room understood something profound. Leadership, courage, and true recognition were not always loud or obvious. Sometimes they were subtle, deliberate, and powerful precisely because they required no words. Emily Hayes, sitting calmly at her corner table, had just become a living example of that truth, leaving an indelible impression on every Marine who had witnessed it. After the generals had subtly acknowledged Emily Hayes in the mess hall, a quiet buzz began to spread among the Marines who had witnessed the moment. While the general's words were mostly muted and private, those paying close attention could catch hints of their conversation. They were discussing missions, operations, and experiences that were not public knowledge. These were critical, high-stakes operations, some overseas and some in training environments, where Emily had demonstrated extraordinary skill, leadership, and courage. For the Marines present, hearing fragments of these discussions sparked curiosity, awe, and a deepening sense of respect for her. Emily remained composed throughout. Her calm demeanor had become almost like a shield, allowing her to observe without drawing unnecessary attention to herself. Years of experience had taught her that in situations like this, maintaining poise was more powerful than making any dramatic gesture. Her mind was alert, cataloging the reactions of those around her while remaining focused on the unspoken acknowledgment of her accomplishments. She understood that leadership often manifests in subtle ways, and the general's quiet recognition was far more meaningful than any public display could have been. As the generals continued their brief conversation among themselves, Emily's colleagues began to piece together the story. Some recalled hearing about her previous missions, covert operations where she had been instrumental in planning and execution. Others remembered her role in high-risk training exercises, where her strategic decisions had saved lives and prevented disasters. Slowly, the whispers in the mess hall transformed from curiosity into admiration. Marines who had once underestimated her now realized that they were in the presence of someone truly exceptional. The Marine who had shoved her earlier could hardly believe what he was seeing. He had acted thoughtlessly, assuming Emily was just another officer, someone who could be brushed aside in the rush of the morning routine. Now, confronted with the general's recognition, he was forced to confront the reality of his mistake. Emily's achievements were far beyond anything he had imagined, and his earlier disrespect seemed almost trivial in comparison. A sense of humility and newfound respect replaced the confusion and awkwardness he had felt moments before. The general's conversation revealed more than just Emily's professional accomplishments. It also highlighted her character. They spoke quietly about her resilience, her decision-making under pressure, and her ability to maintain calm and clarity in the most challenging circumstances. These qualities, they noted, were rare and invaluable in a Marine officer. While medals and commendations could recognize acts of bravery, true leadership was reflected in consistency, judgment, and integrity over time. Emily embodied all of these traits, and the general's acknowledgment was a testament to the respect she had earned through years of dedication. For the other Marines in the room, the lesson was clear. They had witnessed a remarkable moment in which rank, reputation, and experience converged. Emily had not sought attention, nor had she reacted dramatically to the earlier shove. Yet, the general's recognition made her extraordinary qualities undeniable. It became apparent that respect in the military was not always about public displays, loud accolades, or formal ceremonies. Sometimes, it was about subtle gestures, careful observation, and the quiet validation of those who had the authority and knowledge to truly understand an officer's worth. As Emily sipped her coffee, she reflected briefly on her career. Each mission she had completed, each training exercise she had led, and each moment of quiet decision-making had prepared her for situations exactly like this. The general's recognition was not surprising to her, because she had always understood that actions speak louder than words. It was a reminder that true leadership is measured not by how others perceive you in the moment, but by the consistency of your character and the results of your decisions over time. The generals eventually concluded their conversation and began to move toward the exit of the mess hall, but the impact of their presence lingered. Marines continued to exchange quiet words about Emily's past missions, and a newfound respect for her authority and skill settled over the room. The push she had received earlier now seemed almost irrelevant. It had become a mere footnote in a much larger story of achievement, recognition, and character. The incident had inadvertently highlighted Emily's composure and professionalism, making the general's acknowledgment even more meaningful. In that moment, the mess hall had transformed into more than just a place for breakfast. It had become a classroom in leadership, courage, and respect. Every Marine who had witnessed the interaction learned something vital. True excellence is often invisible until someone with experience and authority recognizes it. Emily Hayes had earned that recognition through years of dedication, resilience, and quiet brilliance. Her calm reaction to the shove, combined with her impressive record, created a powerful example for others to follow. By the time the generals left, the atmosphere in the mess hall had changed permanently. Marines now regarded Emily with a mix of admiration and awe, fully aware that she was not just a capable officer, but an extraordinary one. The quiet acknowledgement from the highest-ranking leaders had cemented her reputation in a way that no conversation or rumor could ever fully capture. And for Emily, the moment was a reminder that patience, composure, and dedication often speak louder than any dramatic act or public recognition. This day, which had begun like any other, had quietly become a turning point in how her peers perceived her. The story of her calmness, skill, and the general's recognition would circulate throughout the base for weeks, inspiring respect and admiration among Marines at all levels. Emily Hayes had once again proven that true leadership is demonstrated not in words, but in actions, presence, and the quiet, unwavering integrity that commands respect effortlessly. The moment in the mess hall had shifted from ordinary to extraordinary, and one person felt that shift more than anyone else: the Marine who had pushed Emily Hayes earlier that morning. He sat frozen, still holding his tray, suddenly realizing the weight of what had just happened. What had seemed like a small, insignificant act, a simple shove in the rush of the morning, was now magnified in a way he could not ignore. The general's recognition of Emily had illuminated the depth of her experience, her skills, and her leadership, and in that light, his earlier action appeared clumsy, careless, and even disrespectful. He replayed the moment in his mind. At the time, he had been irritated, tired, and thinking only of his own need to get breakfast quickly. Emily had been in his way, calm and unassuming, and in a split second, he had shoved her aside without a second thought. Now, faced with the silent acknowledgment from the highest-ranking officers in the Corps, he felt a wave of humility. He understood, perhaps for the first time, that Emily Hayes was no ordinary officer. She had endured situations he could scarcely imagine, led missions that required courage and precision, and commanded respect through actions rather than words. The Marine shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his mind racing. He realized that his initial perception of Emily had been limited and superficial. To him, she had seemed like any other junior officer, someone who could be pushed or overlooked. But the general's acknowledgment had exposed the truth. Emily was extraordinary. She possessed a quiet strength and a record of accomplishments that demanded respect, whether or not anyone made it known. He felt a mixture of embarrassment, awe, and an almost physical sense of guilt for underestimating her. Around him, other Marines were watching the interaction with a mixture of curiosity and admiration. They had seen the general's subtle recognition, and they understood its significance. Emily's calm response to the shove, combined with her impressive reputation, had created a powerful contrast that everyone could sense. The Marine who had acted thoughtlessly now understood that he had been given a rare lesson in humility and respect. The room seemed to watch him as he grappled with the realization that appearances could be deceiving, and that true skill and leadership were often invisible until recognized by those who truly understood them. Emily, as always, remained composed. She did not scold, glare, or make any dramatic gesture. She understood that her role was not to humiliate or shame anyone, but to demonstrate professionalism through action and demeanor. Her calmness in the face of disrespect had spoken volumes, and now the general's acknowledgment reinforced that lesson. In that quiet, almost imperceptible way, Emily had taught everyone present, both the Marine who had pushed her and those who had been watching, a profound lesson about respect, patience, and leadership. The generals, meanwhile, continued their brief observation before moving on. Though their conversation was quiet and private, the respect they had shown Emily was unmistakable. They had recognized her for her achievements, her composure, and her ability to lead under pressure. Every Marine in the room could sense it, even without hearing the words. The silent acknowledgement of the generals made it clear that Emily's value was immense, and that she had earned it through consistent, extraordinary performance. For the Marine who had shoved her, the realization was overwhelming. He had acted impulsively, thinking that a minor shove would go unnoticed or unchallenged. Instead, he had inadvertently highlighted Emily's strength and professionalism. The general's recognition made his mistake more apparent, but it also offered an opportunity, a chance to reflect, to understand, and to learn from someone who embodied the qualities he was just beginning to appreciate. The embarrassment he felt was accompanied by a newfound respect, a deep awareness that Emily Hayes had earned every ounce of recognition she received. Around the room, Other Marines were also taking note. They had witnessed an extraordinary display of composure and skill, and the way the generals had acknowledged Emily reinforced the lesson. Respect in the military, they realized, is not always about rank or visibility. It is about competence, integrity, and the ability to maintain composure under pressure. Emily had demonstrated all of these qualities effortlessly, and the general's silent acknowledgment had made it undeniable. As the moments passed, the Marine who had pushed her began to regain some composure. He quietly reflected on the lesson he had learned. Humility, he realized, was a vital part of military service. Judging someone based on appearance or a single interaction could be misleading. True respect had to be earned, and Emily Hayes had done just that. Through years of service, countless missions, and unwavering professionalism. By the time the generals moved on and the room gradually returned to its normal rhythm, the impact of the moment lingered. The Marine who had shoved her no longer felt the irritation or impatience that had motivated his action. Instead, he carried a mix of admiration, humility, and a deeper understanding of what it meant to serve alongside someone truly exceptional. For the rest of the Marines, the incident became more than just a story. It became a lesson in leadership, character, and the importance of recognizing excellence, even when it is not immediately obvious. Emily Hayes, calm and composed as ever, returned to her routine. She had not needed to demand respect or assert her authority. Her actions, combined with the subtle acknowledgement from the highest-ranking leaders, had spoken louder than words ever could. The Marine who had pushed her, along with everyone else in the mess hall, had been given a powerful example of how true leadership and professionalism manifest. Through quiet strength, patience, and unwavering integrity. In the end, the shove in the mess hall, which had seemed like a minor incident, had become a defining moment, not for Emily, who remained the same capable officer she always was, but for those who had witnessed her composure and the recognition from the generals. It was a moment that left a lasting impression on everyone present, a reminder that respect is earned, not assumed, and that true excellence is often revealed in quiet, powerful ways. The air in the mess hall was still thick with anticipation. The generals had subtly acknowledged Emily Hayes, and the entire room felt the weight of their presence. Yet, the moment was about to grow even more remarkable. One of the generals, a tall officer with years of experience commanding Marines in critical missions, gestured subtly to his colleagues. Without a word, he signaled for a small, impromptu recognition to take place right there, in the heart of the mess hall. It was unusual, unexpected, and yet entirely fitting for the woman who had earned their respect through years of service, courage, and dedication. Emily, seated calmly at her corner table, didn't initially realize what was happening. She had grown accustomed to receiving recognition in quiet, understated ways, and this moment, though public, felt like a natural extension of her career. Her focus, as always, remained steady. She was alert to her surroundings, noticing the subtle shifts in posture, the whispered conversations among the Marines, and the barely perceptible gestures of the generals. She understood that this was not about personal pride, but about honoring values, dedication, and leadership that had been proven over time. The generals approached her table deliberately, their presence commanding attention without requiring loud announcements. The room fell into a respectful silence as they acknowledged her directly. One of them spoke quietly, addressing Emily in a tone that was firm yet warm, recognizing her extraordinary contributions to the Corps. The words were simple, but their meaning was profound. They spoke of missions completed successfully, of operations led with precision, and of lives saved because of her skill and calm judgment. Every Marine in the room listened intently, understanding that this was a rare and exceptional acknowledgement from the highest-ranking officers. Emily's colleagues watched with awe. For those who had witnessed the shove earlier, the contrast was striking. The officer who had pushed her was now visibly humbled, understanding that he had been in the presence of someone exceptional. Others, who had only glimpsed her professional reputation in passing, were beginning to appreciate the depth of her achievements. The general's recognition transformed the mess hall into a space of quiet celebration, a moment in which accomplishments and character were honored not with loud ceremonies, but with deliberate, meaningful acknowledgement. As the recognition continued, the generals highlighted not only Emily's professional achievements but also her personal qualities. They spoke of her composure under pressure, her ability to lead with empathy and clarity, and her unwavering commitment to her team. These were traits that could not be taught in a classroom or earned through a single mission. They were cultivated through years of discipline, experience, and resilience. Emily's calm reaction to the earlier shove, combined with her remarkable record, illustrated these qualities perfectly. She had demonstrated that leadership is not about asserting authority aggressively, but about inspiring respect through action, integrity, and unwavering dedication. The Marines in the room began to grasp the significance of what they were witnessing. This was not a typical commendation or routine praise. It was an acknowledgment from the very top of the Corps. The general's decision to honor Emily publicly, albeit quietly and with dignity, reinforced the lesson that true recognition often transcends ceremony. It is about the acknowledgement of one's peers and superiors, who have seen the challenges faced and the excellence achieved. In this moment, Emily Hayes had become a living example of what it means to lead with honor, skill, and unwavering professionalism. Even the Marine who had shoved her earlier could not look away. The embarrassment he had felt moments before had been replaced by profound respect. He now understood that Emily's calm demeanor was not weakness or passivity. It was strength, discipline, and confidence grounded in real experience. The recognition from the generals made it clear that she had earned every ounce of respect given, and that the brief shove had been inconsequential compared to the accomplishments she had quietly built over her career. As the recognition continued, Emily's attention remained focused but composed. She accepted the acknowledgement gracefully, nodding slightly to the generals and returning their respect with a quiet dignity. There was no need for flamboyance or words of self-praise. Her presence alone conveyed gratitude and professionalism. The general's acknowledgement, combined with the respect of her peers, created a moment that would be remembered across the base for weeks to come. It was a rare intersection of humility, accomplishment, and leadership, a moment in which excellence was honored without fanfare, yet in a way that left a lasting impact. The atmosphere in the mess hall shifted permanently after that acknowledgement. Conversations resumed, but now they were infused with admiration and inspiration. Marines who had once underestimated Emily now saw her as a benchmark of excellence, a model of what it meant to serve with courage, discipline, and integrity. Her colleagues understood that respect was earned not through loud statements or aggressive assertion, but through consistent professionalism, skill, and calm leadership under pressure. By the time the generals departed, Emily Hayes had been honored in a way that few officers ever experienced. The incident that began with a minor shove had evolved into a defining moment of recognition and respect. The Marines who witnessed it would remember the lesson clearly. Leadership is demonstrated through composure, courage, and quiet excellence. Public acknowledgement, when it comes from those who truly understand one's achievements, is both powerful and humbling. Emily returned to her routine, calm and composed as always. The recognition from the generals was not just a personal moment. It was a lesson for everyone in the room. It reinforced the idea that excellence, humility, and integrity are inseparable in true leadership. And as the Marines went about their day, they carried with them the memory of a quiet yet extraordinary acknowledgement, a moment that would shape their understanding of respect, achievement, and the kind of officer Emily Hayes represented. The events of that morning had left a lasting impression on everyone in the mess hall. Emily Hayes, calm and composed, had been honored in a subtle yet profoundly meaningful way. The four generals had recognized her not with grand speeches or medals, but through quiet acknowledgement that carried far more weight than any formal ceremony could. It was a recognition rooted in understanding, experience, and respect, an acknowledgement of her courage, professionalism, and years of unwavering dedication. As the generals exited the hall, a sense of reverence lingered. Marines returned to their routines, but their demeanor had shifted. The earlier chatter and casual conversations now carried a tone of reflection. Everyone who had witnessed the interaction began to realize the depth of what they had seen. Emily's composure, combined with the acknowledgement from the highest-ranking officers, had transformed a simple moment into a profound lesson in leadership and respect. It was not something that could be fully captured in words, but the energy in the room made its significance clear. Emily quietly observed the reactions around her. She noticed the subtle glances of admiration from her peers, the newfound respect in their posture, and the silent acknowledgment of her calm strength. She understood that moments like this carried a ripple effect. What one person witnessed could influence how they treated others, how they led, and how they measured true excellence. For Emily, the recognition was not about personal pride. It was about reinforcing the values she had always lived by: professionalism, composure, and integrity. The Marine who had shoved her earlier now fully grasped the lesson. His initial embarrassment had been replaced with understanding and respect. He realized that Emily's calm response was not weakness but strength, and that her career was a testament to what true leadership meant. The incident, once minor and seemingly inconsequential, had become a powerful reminder that appearances could be deceiving and that respect must be earned, not assumed. He silently vowed to approach his own actions with more awareness and humility, recognizing the value of composure and professionalism in every interaction. Other Marines, too, reflected on the events of the morning. They discussed Emily's accomplishments in quiet tones, piecing together stories of her past missions and leadership roles. Some had heard whispers about her covert operations, her strategic brilliance, and her ability to handle high-pressure situations that few could imagine. Now, seeing the acknowledgment from the generals, those stories took on new meaning. They realized that Emily's influence extended beyond what was immediately visible, and that her impact on the Corps was profound and enduring. The lesson extended beyond just recognition. It was about understanding the essence of leadership. Emily had demonstrated that leadership is not always loud or overt. It is often quiet, measured, and defined by actions rather than words. Her composure in the face of disrespect, her unwavering focus, and her ability to maintain professionalism under scrutiny had left an indelible mark on everyone present. The general's acknowledgment simply confirmed what her peers had begun to see: that true respect and authority are earned through consistent excellence, integrity, and courage. In the days that followed, the story of that morning spread throughout the base. Marines recounted the scene in quiet conversations, emphasizing the calm authority Emily had displayed and the subtle yet profound recognition from the generals. It became an example, a teaching moment for new recruits and seasoned officers alike. The incident illustrated the importance of composure, patience, and the understanding that true respect comes from consistent actions and earned credibility, rather than assumptions or superficial displays of confidence. Emily herself returned to her duties without fanfare. She continued to lead with the same focus and dedication that had earned her the acknowledgement of the generals. She did not boast, and she did not seek further recognition. For her, the moment was simply a reminder of the values she had lived by: commitment, professionalism, and quiet leadership. Yet the impact of that moment resonated far beyond her own perspective. Those who had witnessed it carried the lesson with them, applying it in their own actions, interactions, and leadership decisions. The mess hall, once the site of a minor confrontation, had become a symbol of growth, learning, and respect. Emily Hayes' ability to navigate the situation with grace and dignity demonstrated that true leadership is measured not by immediate reactions or public displays, but by long-term consistency, judgment, and integrity. The Marines who had been present that morning would remember it as a defining moment, a story of composure, courage, and the quiet power of earned respect. Ultimately, the morning concluded not with applause or ceremonial honors, but with a profound, lasting understanding among everyone present. Emily Hayes had quietly taught a lesson that would echo throughout the base. Respect is earned, excellence is demonstrated through consistent action, and leadership is defined by integrity, calm, and the ability to inspire others without demanding it. The general's acknowledgement had cemented this truth, transforming what began as a simple shove into a defining moment of honor, admiration, and inspiration for all who had witnessed it. In that quiet, ordinary setting, extraordinary leadership had been revealed. Emily Hayes' calm presence, professional skill, and unwavering dedication had earned her the recognition she deserved, leaving an indelible impression that would continue to shape the culture of respect, leadership, and excellence within the Corps for years to come. And though she returned to her work as if nothing had changed, the ripples of that moment, subtle, powerful, and unforgettable, continued to spread, shaping the understanding of what it truly means to serve with honor.